Burkina Faso, Mali, and Niger announced that they are exiting the ICC. So far, this is the best news I've heard so far from the UN General Assembly meeting. There's a strategic reason behind their exiting from the ICC. I will come back to that, but first of all, let's go into the details of their exiting. So this is from ChatGTP. Burkina Faso, Mali, and Niger announced they are withdrawing from ICC, the Hawaii-based court. They argue the ICC disproportionately target African leaders and undermine their sovereignty. This is rare, but legal move under Article 127 of Rome Statute, which allows states to withdraw after giving formal notice 1 year notice period. These three are military-led governments that have recently drawn closer to each other and to Russia. Withdrawal signals a pivot away from Western-led institutions. Hitting on the like button will help this video go far, and if you are new to the channel, subscribe. Now let's talk about the strategic reason behind their withdrawal from the ICC. It is no more a secret that the ICC is a toothless bulldog who cannot control the superpowers out there. They only focus on African leaders. That is what they do. And Burkina Faso, Mali, and Niger are led by military coup leaders. Captain Ibrahim Traoré, he came to power through coup d'etat. Chani came to power coup d'etat. Semi Goïta, the same thing. So these three leaders, well, one day, the ICC would definitely prosecute them. Because, you see, note, what brought these leaders to power is because of this terrorism which is happening in the Sahel, right? And after they moved towards the Russians and Chinese, they had enough weapons, or the Russians and Chinese gave them more weapons to attack these terrorist groups. So one day, obviously, it is obvious that one day the ICC will definitely tell them that they are committing war crimes in the Sahel. So these guys have already anticipated what the ICC will do in future. It's simple. Note, Burkina Faso and Mali, Assimi Goïta and Captain Ibrahim Traoré, what brought them to power is not for economic reasons. What brought them to power was this terrorism that was happening across the Sahel. So they came to power because of these terrorist groups that were unaliving people. France was present but did nothing. America even had a military base in Niamey purposely to combat against these terrorist groups, but they did nothing. In fact, what these guys were doing is they refused to give Burkina Faso, Mali, and Niger adequate weapons to fight against these terrorist groups. So it's kind of like they were like, we want to help you fight against these terrorist groups, but we will not give you weapons that will be enough or that can defeat the terrorists. So in reality, use your brain. These guys, I don't want to use, there are some words I don't want to use here. I mean, if you think about it critically, you realize that these were the same people who were, I hope you understand what I'm saying, because I want to be careful with the words that I use on this platform. So you get a point that I'm trying to say. So these guys, technically, you realize that these guys were not interested in defeating these terrorist groups. At a point, these terrorist groups had more powerful weapons, more than the states they were operating in. So the question is, who was arming these terrorist groups in the Sahel? How come that terrorists had powerful weapons more than the state, yet the West and Uncle Sam refused to give the Sahelian nations adequate weapons to defeat the terrorists? So Burkina Faso, Mali, and Niger had no option than to move away from the West, to be specific, France and Uncle Sam, and move towards China and Russia. So they moved towards East. Not just in Burkina Faso, Mali, and Niger. When you look at Congo and the M23 rebel group fight, the same thing is happening. Somebody is sponsoring the M23, clearly. And yet, UN, who is, controlled by the West and Uncle Sam, refused to allow Congo DRC to buy enough weapons to combat against this M23 rebel group. Although the fight against terrorism is not over in the Sahel, but you barely hear about these terrorist groups again, like back in the days. The Chinese and the Russians, they don't restrict Burkina Faso, Mali, and Niger in terms of weapons. Any weapon at all they want, they give it to them. They have given them enough weapons to combat against the terrorist groups. More powerful weapons to combat against the terrorist groups. Note, there is no terrorist group on earth here who is not funded by somebody. There is no terrorist group that is not backed by a state, because it is totally impossible for these terrorist groups to operate without strong funding. Where are they getting the weapons from? Think about it. These weapons are not weapons you can just walk on the market and just buy them and come and start using them. No, hell no. Hell no. Somebody somewhere is sponsoring them. Just today, I came across one disturbing news. Uncle Sam controls the ICC completely. Today, Uncle Sam said they are going after, some ICC investigators because they are investigating Israel war crimes against the Palestinians. So, Uncle Sam is angry. They are going after those who are investigating the whole case. So, you see, whilst Uncle Sam is not part of the ICC yet, they control the ICC. They tell the ICC what to do and what not to do. What happened to Benjamin Netanyahu when ICC declared him as a war criminal? What happened to him? Why is Benjamin Netanyahu still roaming around freely? Putin is still working. They can't touch Putin. Clearly, one of the main reasons why these guys went after Putin was because Uncle Sam ordered them to go after Putin. Now, check Vladimir Putin's case carefully. Why the ICC went after him? They said he was kidnapping children. For what purpose? When you look at what was happening in Ukraine, the war is happening in the ethnic Russian side of Ukraine. So most of the ethnic Russian speakers in Ukraine decided to move to Russia. In war, anything can happen, right? Everybody is trying to survive. Everybody is running. So these were kids who were detached from their parents, because some explosion happened and some of them will be running helter-skelter. So some of these kids couldn't find their parents. Some of their parents ran to the city. So what the Russian government did was to take control of these kids and find their parents and give these kids back to their parents. And boom. The so-called ICC investigators said Putin was kidnapping kids. Think about it clearly. What is Putin going to use kids for? What purpose are those kids going to serve him? Kidnapping kids for what? Now, they failed to tell us what Putin was going to use these kids for. So you see, this is a clear example of how the ICC is being controlled by Western-led institutions and, Uncle Sam. So, Chani, Assami Goita, and Traore is thinking ahead. They see the hypocrisy of the ICC. They see what they do around. So these guys, clearly they are thinking ahead. They know what this ICC can do. They know very well that the West can influence them to do anything to them. So they are thinking ahead. And they know what they are capable of doing. So the bottom line is that ICC only target African leaders or third world countries, especially the global south countries. This is what the ICC target. And Captain Ibrahim Traore, Chani, and Assami Goita has already anticipated that the West will one day use the ICC against them. So clearly these guys are only trying to survive. Period. This is the bottom line. Thank you very much for watching the video once again. Shalom. See you guys in the next episode.